Human trafficking is a global problem that affects some of the world's most vulnerable people. Joining us now is Al Fuertes. He's an assistant professor at George Mason University. He specializes in community-based trauma healing. And Al, I want to start right there with trauma. What do you say to that father we just heard from and to that community?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. It basically really affects not just the individual persons and families, but actually the entire community, including the friends of these people, not just from a psycho-emotional perspective, but basically all aspects of life are affected by this.
It's clear.
And so I believe that this requires, a long process towards healing and recovery.
The driver we know has been charged with manslaughter, but clearly he's part of a bigger internal operation.
That's correct, yes. And for me, the driver is just the smallest fish here. We have to understand that human smuggling and trafficking, these are global, international, and transnational networks. And somehow, we have to go to the roots if we really want to, to address the situation. But as we know, human smuggling and trafficking are really very challenging, and very difficult to address because of the complexity. It's multifaceted, it's multi-layered, and personally, I would also like to believe that perhaps the smugglers, are people whom victims actually know, maybe they are even residents of the same community. We don't know. Because I think what happened here is that there is a very strong correlation or a combination between human smuggling and human trafficking.
Yeah,
so yes.
I wanted to make a distinction about that. Do we know at this point if these people were trafficked against their will or people being smuggled unlawfully, albeit dangerously, on their own merit?
Well, it's still being investigated for sure, but there have been reports that say that those individuals were actually paying, people who were bringing them from point A to point B to point C between 8,000 to 30,000 pounds, and that alone suggests that it must have started as a form of human smuggling. And these people who are desperate to find good employment so that they have something to send back home to their respective families, are just willing to take whatever opportunity they may have, even taking the biggest risks in their lives.
Which countries, Al, are most vulnerable to the trafficking of people, and which countries are the largest recipients of people that are being trafficked? Is this mostly an east-west issue or north to south like we see in the Americas?
I would say all, are really involved and have issues related to human trafficking, whether as source country or transit country, destination country. And unfortunately, majority of the victims are those coming from developing and underdeveloped countries who are really, just wanting to make their lives a little better. And so smugglers are the vulnerability of these individuals.
Talk to us a little bit about the global effort to combat all of this. There's UNODC, NGOs, and has any progress been made, or is it getting worse?
Well, one thing for sure is that already gotten to the attention and consciousness of, I would say, most, if not all, governments. There have already been a set of policies and laws and what have you to really address this issue. But the whole process of implementation, that is another level as well. That's why countries all over the world are also being categorized into three tiers, either tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 country. But the fact is, this is such a multifaceted, problem that involves even, people whom we thought are there to protect the general public. This is the hard truth about human trafficking.
Al, are you suggesting that some of these developed countries are perhaps complacent in not doing enough, perhaps in encouraging this smuggling?
Well, especially, yes, I would say yes, especially countries that have a very high demand, for example, of workers, for example, whether it's in the garment industry or construction or sex tourism or entertainment industry, what have you. And so for as long as there is a strong demand, most likely traffickers would always find ways to provide the supply.
All right, Al Fuertes from George Mason University, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.